And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Reports. I'm Kerry Arnold. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Iolo. How are you, dear?
I'm good, thank you. How are
Better.
you?
I'm good. I'm here. We're all still here. it's it's been a little. I'll tell you, I had an insight. Let's introduce our guest first. Let's do that. Our guest for this evening, he's a researcher and author. Strange Days in the Hockomock Swamp. Mr. Kevin Foster, how are you, sir?
I'm good tonight. Thanks. Nice to be
Man,
on the show.
great to have you here for sure. Well, we'll get into the stuff with Kevin. As always, like to ask you guys in the chat, keep it clean for us. We appreciate it. Y'all be nice to each other. And we're going to be taking questions for Kevin a little bit later in the show. The last third or last quarter, we'll take questions. So I know people like to put their questions up there. Make sure when you have one, put them all in caps. Makes it a lot easier for Danielle and myself to pick them out. But we will be taking them, like I said, last 15, 20 minutes of the show. We'll take those. I had I laugh about it now. I've been putting up doing the narrations for the new channel, which is called The Shutter. You guys need to go and subscribe to that. Now, if you haven't subscribed, go check it out. It's just stories, tales, not tales. What do you want to call them? Accounts. It's accounts, stuff people sent to me, stuff that I had. Ones my grandmother told me. But I woke up day before yesterday morning, and my throat was just dry, and I started coughing. I mean, I was coughing my head off. And of course, nothing's coming with it. You know, it's one of the symptoms of the corona thing. So, yeah, I mean, for like half a day, you could have used my butt for an anchor point for bungee jumping, been perfectly safe. It was not pretty. This thing, I'm telling you, it ended up being just sinus and me talking all day, doing the show. But this virus can turn, like I was telling Kevin, it can turn a usually normally rational person into a hypochondriac. Not that I'm the most rational person there is, but I'm not normally known for being a hypochondriac. But I certainly was then, because Linda's around this stuff every day. You know, she's got a floor full of these patients there at Ochsner in Slidell, and it's of course she's taking every precaution she can, obviously coming in and being safe. But that was all I was thinking. I was like, I got the corona. That's it. I got it. And in which it is something to worry about. I will say this: there were a couple of nurses that had it, and one of them just came back to work, and all she had to say about it wasn't much worse than, or wasn't really any worse than having the normal flu. I think it lasted about 2 weeks, and she had a fever of like 101, and just for like half a day, and then that was it. And just being drained. She said that was the very first thing. She was just fatigued, really fatigued, and then had obviously the dry cough and then the fever, and that was it. It was all uphill after that. But she's 28 years old and no kids, and probably had something to do with it. But all right, y'all ready? We got a few people in here now. Let's get into this. Kevin, you're a Bigfoot researcher, man. You had quite a few experiences. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you thought about Bigfoot or Sasquatch before you ever had any experience? Did you believe they were out there? Or were you indifferent? Did you have any notion about these creatures at all?
I never was a skeptic. I mean, when I was a kid, I first saw the Patterson film called The Creature in the movie theater. And right away, I believed they were out there, but I thought they were out in the West Coast. And then The Legend of Boggy Creek came out, and I said, okay, well, they're, down in the South too. But I never thought they were out in New England area or pretty much anywhere else until I had my encounters.
Well, why don't you kind of take us through what you experienced, and if you want to do them in linear fashion, from your very first one, the more notable ones, whichever ones you feel like talking about.
Yeah, well, my first encounter was probably over 20 years ago. I got divorced then. I had two kids, two boys living up in Maine, and they were always down. I live on Cape Cod. They were always down here for the summer, spending time with me, and then we'd end up camping on the way up through Maine. Anyway, I ended up going to a place called Cobscoke State Park, which is about 3/4 up on the coast of Maine. And I think Daniela did some map of it there. But one day we get up and we always hike this trail along the coast in this state park. And one of the trails went off up into the woods, and we decided to go up the woods. My kids are kind of tired, so they were dragging behind me. So I don't know, we probably went about a mile into the woods, and I was coming up this embankment, this crest, and I was ahead of the kids, and I came up to the top of it. And when I got there, I looked down, and probably about 300 yards away, there was this dark black thing stooped over the trail, and all of a sudden this thing just stood up. It had a red squirrel in its hand, and it walked off into the woods on 2 feet. And I said to myself, that's no bear. But I kept trying to dismiss it, that it wasn't a Sasquatch, because, again, I didn't believe they were up there in that area. So I turned around and got a hold of my 2 kids, and I said, well, I'm tired. Let's go back to the campground. And we took off. And that whole night, I was just trying to talk myself out of, that wasn't a Sasquatch, but it was no bear. That was a Sasquatch. The next day, I decided, just to be safe, we'd go hike a trail on the other side of the park. And we were going past this ranger station, past a pond, and there was this big open field. And all of a sudden, I just came upon these huge mounds of scat that were human-like, but they were huge. And they were filled with blueberries and rodents. And again, I grabbed my kids because I was kind of, panicked, and said, hey, I'm tired. Let's go back. And we did that. So anyway, I dropped my kids off, and I had the week off. And my brother had built a new house in Vermont. And I was the painter in the family. So I was the one that was supposed to go over and paint all the rooms for him. So I ended up going to just a little bit past White River Junction of Vermont. And I spent the day painting. And then in the afternoon, late afternoon, I took my dog out for a walk down this snowmobile trail. And again, I was coming up this embankment on the trail, and my dog just froze. I mean, he was like petrified with fear. And I'm like, what's wrong with you, Reno? And all of a sudden, these deep huffs, grunts were coming from this spruce tree that he was looking at. And the next thing I know, these low guttural growls are coming from the spruce tree. And all of a sudden, the tree just starts shaking violently. And my dog just turned around and took off. He was terrified. And I started to move closer, and the growling got louder. And I looked up, and I could see from the shoulder down to the hand shaking the tree. And it was a huge, hairy, limb that was shaking this tree. And I was terrified. I turned around and took off and ran after the dog. And we ran through this cornfield, and I kept looking over my shoulder the whole time because I was afraid whatever this was coming after me. So finally we got out to the road. We went back to the house. I made dinner. I kind of calmed down. And that night, my dog woke up in the middle of the night. He's barking out this picture window. So I got up to see what he was doing and what he was looking at. And all of a sudden I see what I thought were headlights going through the woods. And I thought, who's out there? Somebody on an ATV? And then I noticed that these lights were like separating, and they were moving back and forth across this field. And my dog was like barking, but he was not looking at these orbs. He was looking somewhere else off to the right. So I'm watching these orbs, and they eventually just disappeared into the woods. And all of a sudden, this, what I thought was a big bush in the middle of the field, stood up, and it was like an 8-foot tall shadow, and it just walked off into the woods. I didn't sleep well that night, and then the next morning, I packed up and took off. And my brother was kind of funny. He's like, "Well, why didn't you finish painting the rooms?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was sick. I didn't want to tell anyone this story because they would have thought I was crazy." So those were the first two encounters I had, and
Now,
yeah.
do you associate orbs with this creature?
At that time, no, because this was like, over 20 years ago, and I hadn't started reading and doing research on it. But they were definitely orbs that were flying around down there.
It's weird. We've heard that several times. People mention orbs and Bigfoot. The Omaha Indians did it when we were there. They talked about seeing these just balls of light floating through the woods and like mists glowing. And just wondered if you attributed that to Sasquatch activity, or if it was just a happy coincidence.
No, I didn't. At the time, I didn't put two and two together. But now I hear all these stories about orbs and Bigfoots and UFOs.
Makes me lean on that EMF deal a lot.
Yeah.
Just that much more. People talk about infrasound and how they do this infrasound thing that affects you. But what affects you even worse, the same type of symptoms people are talking about, is high levels of electromagnetic frequency. Like I said, if I ever started hearing voices in my head, I would look up for high-powered power lines. Would be the first thing I looked for. So when you hear a lot of these things, people talk about hearing voices and feeling sick and, dizzy, missing time, disoriented. That's all symptoms that EMF can do to you. It's been proven. We know that can happen.
Yeah.
So, and then you talk about balls of light, it's another one. So sorry to interrupt there.
No, that's fine.
Carry on.
So those were my first two encounters, and I guess I could talk about. I kind of like put that stuff away. I kind of forgot about it, and 3 years ago, I was up at my son's house in Maine, and he lives on an island, and he's actually in the middle of the Great Wasp Game Preserve up there. And I decided to take my granddaughter down to the pond, which is like just off a dirt road there. And there's all kinds of trails that go out behind the pond there. So we were just walking, starting to walk down the trail. We came to the pond, and I looked out on the pond, and there was a seagull out there like flapping around, but it couldn't fly. And I'm like, well, maybe a turtle's got it and it's trying to pull it under. And then its head flopped back, and I could see its throat was cut. It was bleeding from its throat. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. And this was on the other end of the pond. So I said to my granddaughter, why don't we walk around the back of the pond and see if we can get over there and, maybe help this seagull out and see what's going on. And as we started around this corner, again, just like in Vermont, I started hearing these grunts and these huffs, and all of a sudden this deep guttural growl came out again, and the whole thing in Vermont flashed back in that instant. And I said to my granddaughter, do you hear that? And she says, yeah. And I said, had another dog at the time. I said, why don't you and the dog go out to the road and just head back to the house, and I'm going to move in a little closer and look at this. So she started to head back. I started to move closer, and the tree started shaking again, just like in Vermont. The growls got really deep and loud. I could feel it in my chest. And just when that happened, I heard this crashing off to the left behind where, this thing was happening. And by that point, I had started reading stories about, encounters and everything. And there's sometimes not always just one, there's a few. So I started to panic, and I said, my God, my granddaughter's alone on the road and there might be another one out there. So I turned around and took off. But when my son got back, he had been working that day. We went up to the spot and we looked around, and I couldn't find any footprints or anything because it was all like granite flooring, so nothing would show up. But the seagull was gone. So I think it was sitting there waiting for the seagull. And I've heard that they do eat seagulls, but I thought that was a pretty interesting encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say it right quick. Jeff Townsend, $50 super chat. That's incredible. Says I support Bigfoot Odyssey and what it stands for, and the great people that bring it to us. Thank you, Jeff. That means a lot, especially right now. We appreciate that. That's awesome. You're good. You're a good man, Jeff. Thank you. Sorry. All right,
Nope.
Daniela, you take over here.
Well, what led you to getting into the cryptids and the interest in all the other stuff you do?
Well, basically
He's frozen. I think he's frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll come back. You froze up a bit then.
Yeah. All we heard was basically.
Yeah, we lost all the pictures. But anyway, after my encounters, I just started reading all kinds of things online, and that map of all the cryptids there, I started reading the stories of the wildmen in New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine, stories that were of, different Sasquatches in the area. And actually, my brother's house is a big hotspot for Sasquatch sightings. So I started reading all these different stories, and it brought me to the Hockomock Swamp and the Bridgewater Triangle. And the Hockomock Swamp sits, smack in the middle of the Bridgewater Triangle. If you want to put that picture up too.
Yeah, sorry. There we go.
Yeah, so the big green area in the middle up there is the Hockomock Swamp. And I mean, there's stories of giant black snakes that come out of there, and thunderbirds and UFOs, orbs, pterodactyls, of course, Sasquatches, and there's black helicopters coming through there, and giant cats, devil dogs, and the interesting thing is there's a lot of stories of what they call the Pukwudgie.
What is the Pukwudgie exactly?
Well, I got a couple pictures I gave you there too, but Pukwudgie is it's kind of like a gnome type of creature, and sometimes they're naked, sometimes they have like Indian garb on, they call it, and carrying small bows and arrows. And I was kind of skeptical when I first heard about these things, and then I just kept reading more and more reports, not just from the Hockomock Swamp, but all over the country about these small, some people call them like small Sasquatches. But there was one interesting story. A guy was out walking his dog, and at the end of the road is the Hockomock Swamp, and there was a street light there. And this was early morning. It was still dark out. He's walking his dog down there, and all of a sudden, under the street light, he thought he saw like an otter. And he got closer and closer to it, and he looked at it and said, "No, that's not an otter. That's a strange-looking creature." He saw a Pukwudgie, but it reached out its arm, and it was trying to communicate with him, and it kept saying, "E-Y-E, E-Y-E." And the guy kind of got freaked out and turned around and took off with the dog. But
Heard that.
Yeah.
Are you talking about that Bridgewater Triangle? What is it? Why do they call that area the Bridgewater Triangle? What makes that triangle there?
Well, actually, Lauren Coleman came up with the term the Bridgewater Triangle, but it's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle, with disappearances. But it's just a triangulation that has all this paranormal activity that comes out of it.
Okay.
All these creatures, and there's ghosts. People see like Native American ghosts in ghost canoes paddling around or dancing around, and there's just a lot of weird phenomenon. There's a lot of UFO sightings there, a lot of orb sightings. There's actually, what used to be the Raynham dog track used to be open there, and hundreds of people would be out there, watching the dogs race. And a lot of times people would see orbs off in the corner of the racetrack. They saw UFOs coming over the racetrack. There were two Boston reporters that were heading out to a news report, and they saw a huge triangular object fly right over them on like Route 44, I think it was. So there's a lot of paranormal activity that comes out of there.
So it's just something that's born out of activity. It's not like ley lines that create this or a valley or anything like that. It's just there's a lot of activity that happens within this particular triangle.
Within this triangle area. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I noticed one of theirs was a grey wolf, and they captured one. There was a specimen of one. Do you know any details about that?
A grey wolf that was captured out of the Hockomock?
Yeah. In Massachusetts, off that map, I'm just looking at grey wolf sightings.
That I think would go back to what they call the devil dogs. They see these huge wolf-like creatures, but a lot of them have like hyena-shaped bodies, and they're a lot bigger than wolves. And there's been a lot of sightings of those coming out of that area.
Yeah. There's a question, and I want to know as well. Andy gone fishing. What is a Wendigo? What's the difference between that and a rake and all the other things? Or are they just all the same thing, and we just give them different titles?
Well, as far as I know, a Wendigo was a Native American term for a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot.
Right.
The rake, I'm not really too familiar with that. I've read some stories about it, but supposedly it's a different type of cryptid.
I always heard the rake was something that somebody made up. Was like a creepy pasta or something like that. But I've seen some pictures.
I've seen some things. I've seen videos that of these rakes, and they're pretty scary looking, and they look pretty real to me.
Yeah, well, you can't type in rake and find a lot of them. I think there's one, they call it a fallen angel, and it's just this skinny white bald dude, pale, and he turns and looks at the camera, and his eyes are glowing. I don't know if you guys remember seeing that.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that one.
Just absolutely strange. Game cam pictures of them. There's several of those. I just had a story that a friend of mine's dad had run into something like that right here in Macomb, Mississippi. I just put it out on Bigfoot Odyssey, or maybe I might have put it out on Shutter too. I can't remember. But to me, that's what he described, was this pale, skinny thing with the oversized head and long fingers, and it was just standing right there behind him. But before that, he heard a little girl scream, like a little kid screaming for help. So I just wonder if this thing wasn't imitating that to get him to come out.
Well, I've heard a lot of stories of similar things where they mimic people and children and babies. Actually, I was at my son's house up in Maine about 2 years ago, July 4th weekend, and he had a bunch of people over. We were sitting around a campfire at night. And of course, I'm the Sasquatch guy, so I start telling my stories, that different things. And 8 people in that group up in Maine either had encounters themselves or had an uncle or a father or something that owned property in Maine. And they had all these stories to relate. But one that stuck out was there's a old Air Force base, I forget the name of it, up in Aroostook County. And it's closed down. Well, when one of these guys was a kid, they climbed the fence at night and they went in there and they found 3-toed footprints going through there. And they were going down all these, hallways and things, and walking through puddles and everything. But they said they got down to the end of this hallway and they could hear a baby crying. And one of the guys says, well, let's go help this baby. And the other kid said, that's not a baby. And they get out of there. So it was just odd that here I am up in Maine, and I'm just hearing all these different stories from a group of kids that, it was probably 8 out of 20 that had different encounters up there.
Are you going out yourself and doing any?
Yeah, I am actually going into the Hockomock Swamp. I've been waiting for this campground to open up which actually sits right at the edge of the swamp. And a couple buddies are going to join me, and a couple. Well, I have a drone myself. We're going to fly drones over the area and do some kayak excursions down the rivers and actually walk in there too. And hopefully that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. We'll be able to get out there and do that.
What are you planning to find out there? What's your...
Well, I'm actually a videographer by trade. So my idea is just to get something good on film, that undisputable proof. I don't believe in the concept that you have to kill one to prove they're out there.
No. How do you think you're going to get the footage? Because I know it's quite difficult, isn't it? How do you think in your mind it's going to happen? Or
just being in the right place at the right time, you know. And I spent a lot of time out in the woods, and you know, I've had different encounters, and like I said, in Maine, Vermont, I've had stuff happen to me down in the Everglades. I've found footprints down there too. So if I start going into the Hockomock Swamp, I'm just hoping to be in the right place at the right time.
And amongst all the other cryptids that hang out down there, you could have a lot.
It sounds like there's a lot to choose from that come out of there. So I'm actually would love to get a pukwudgie on film, but you know, I haven't seen any out there yet.
No. What's the most fascinating cryptid to you? What is it the Bigfoot thing? Yeah.
I tend to lean towards Bigfoot and Sasquatch because of my own personal encounters. But like I said, since being a kid, I've always believed they were out there, and sure enough, I had my own encounters, so I know they're out there.
Yeah.
But I would like to start seeing some of these other things too. I have seen UFOs. I saw a ghost too in Germany, so you know, I've had experience with other things.
This picture's interesting.
Yeah, that picture I sent you, because that was very similar to the orbs that I saw over the field up. You know, that's just basically what it is. It's the orbs that I saw.
So strange, isn't it?
Was that a still from the video?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I pulled that up online somewhere. I forget where it was, but yeah, it's a still from a video.
So it looks like there's several in there. I mean, it's obviously not a raindrop because it's the only one.
Right.
And it looks like it's moving at a kind of a strange angle there. That's pretty weird.
But is there something there in the bottom? Is there a circle there in the bottom right and something up there in the top left?
Yeah, there looks like there's three. It looks like one's moving and the other two, you know, might have been stationary at the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you've wrote a book.
Mm-hmm.
You based it on stuff that's out there, but you've wrote around it. Sorry.
Yeah, basically, I took these stories that I was reading of these different cryptids and UFOs and ghosts and everything else that was paranormal out of the Hockomock Swamp, and I took my own encounters too, and I made this fictional story of, well, basically it's a girl that is camping in her backyard, and she gets dragged into the swamp by a Sasquatch, and a hunter comes along and rescues her, and they end up, the two of them, fighting their way out of the Hockomock Swamp, and they come across all the other creatures like thunderbirds and pterodactyls, and the wolves are a big part of it. And there's one particular sinister jet black Sasquatch that's just intent on getting this girl throughout the whole book. So it's something I'm actually working on right now, trying to get made into either a movie or a TV series.
It sounds interesting. I'm going to check it out.
Good.
So out of the accounts the pterodactyl ones, what have you heard about those creatures?
There was one that stands out where there were two women sitting out on their porch area at dusk, and all of a sudden they heard this the wing beats coming over the treetops, and they looked up and it flew right over them. This huge pterodactyl. They said it was definitely a flying dinosaur that they saw. And there's been stories, Indian lore stories too, that date back talking about, well, the thunderbirds and these flying dinosaurs that, you know, habit the swamp.
Do you hear anything about Dogman down there? What's your
No, well, I haven't come across anything standing on two legs walking around, but there's plenty of stories of, like I said, these giant hyena-like devil dogs walking around there. And, you know, a lot of people that see the dog man start out by saying that they saw it crawling around on all fours, and then all of a sudden it gets up and walks on 2 feet. I don't have one of those in my book, but I'm thinking about doing a sequel and definitely introducing that into the sequel. But I haven't come across the Dogman stories coming out of the Hockomock Swamp, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are there.
But you base this book off of a lot of your own personal experiences, right? And you've only just told us about a few. What other experiences you've had, especially recently, that you could tell us about?
Well, I've been camping a lot in Cobscook State Park up in Maine, on my own by myself at times, and I've had different things like the huge footsteps walking around my tent. I got woken up one night to this owl that was like right above my tent, but it wasn't an owl. It was, you know, this real deep off owly sound. And I actually was waiting for my boys one time to show up. They were supposed to go camping with me. They were older. They were in their early 20s. And I had gone out and dug a bunch of clams that day. So we we're going to have a big cookout. Well, anyway, they couldn't make it. Their ride fell through or something. So I had all these clams, and I took them and I put them down. The campgrounds are right on the ocean. I put them down in the ocean, you know, on the beach, and I figured the tide had come up and I'd go out the next day and get them again. So I woke up that night and I heard these heavy footsteps around my tent. I heard the deep owl hoo, and I could hear the clams down on the beach clattering around. And I thought at first it was just a raccoon, but then all of a sudden this other owly hooing sound was coming from where the clams were. And these two owls, what I thought was owls at the time, were communicating with each other, but they were not owls. This was very deep and off. So that was one thing. And then another time, like I said, I was down in the Everglades, and I was riding down I was in Shark Valley, and I was riding down the bike path there, which goes along this canal. And I came across this 16-foot muddy footprint, and at first I thought it was just a joke, like someone had painted this on the bike trail. And I got off the bike and I walked over and I looked, and I could see the dermal ridges in the muddy footprint. And I walked back to my bike, and I was getting my camera, and I was starting to take my helmet off because I wanted to put it down next to the footprint to get scale for this thing. And all of a sudden this alligator went into a death roll, like right next to me in the canal, and I kind of panicked because all these other alligators were coming over to investigate it. And I jumped on my bike and I took off, and I rode the 11 miles to this tower, and I said, well, I'll come back and I'll just get a picture on the way back. And when I got out there, this thunderstorm came in, and we had like 20 minutes of hard rain, so I knew the footprint was, you know, washed away. But anyway, I've seen footprints. I've been up to Bar Harbor. I've found twisted trees like 12 feet up, just, you know, snapped, twisted. I was actually panning this panoramic view of the top of this mountain, and I was filming across to another top of a mountain, and there were 3 huge rock formations over there, and these are like 4-foot wide boulders stacked upon each other. And I remember my son went next to me, and he's like, Dad, there's no way that somebody could have lifted those rocks and done that. And, and you hear that a lot of Sasquatch activity is around quarries, and they build these rock formations too. So,
what about your son? Has your son picked up on anything when he's been out?
I have 2 sons, and I did have one son who had moved into a house up in Bar Harbor, and he was calling me on the phone at night, holding the phone up, saying, Dad, listen to this. And there were these howls coming over the phone. And he was telling me that there were nights that they would hear the samurai chatter outside their window. The rubbish kept getting broken into. And I was actually there one time, and I saw, you could see, it was just this big rip, like this big hand had gone in and pulled everything out. And to make a long story short, this particular son ended up leaving the house because he was in the house alone one night, and he said they had this big deck, and they have these big picture windows that overlook the deck, and he was watching some movie, and it was dark out, so he couldn't really see outside, but he said he heard these huge footsteps running around the porch area. So he's like, what the heck is that? And he started to get up, and all of a sudden he said he saw this 8-foot shadowy figure come right up against the glass, but he couldn't really make out the details because it was too far away from the light in there. But he ended up moving out of that place pretty quickly.
You hear about it, don't you? I always think, I don't know how people can stay in these places. It's not always that easy to move, is it, for everybody?
No.
So have you ever felt threatened on any of your encounters, or like?
Well, both encounters in Vermont and Maine where the tree was shaking, I definitely felt threatened. I'm in the woods a lot. I've seen bears, I've seen moose, I've seen all kinds of animals, and I don't usually get panicked or scared, but in both those incidents, when the tree started shaking and that deep guttural growl came, and like I said, I could feel it in my chest. I mean, it was that, loud. Yeah, that scared me. I ended up taking off both times. Well, once because of my dog, I was chasing my dog, and the second time was my granddaughter. I wanted to make sure she was safe. But I definitely won't go in the woods alone. I mean, I want at least one other person with me from now on. But I am not going to be running away. I'm going to get closer and investigate and see what these things are. And like I said, hopefully get these on film.
Well, you talk about that kind of fear. It's hard to get people that haven't had the experience to understand that it's more than just self-preservation, which is just smart. That should be in all of us to have the type of fear where it's self-preservation, but it's something else there. That for me, I would rather live in a house that was haunted, that had 30 ghosts living in it, messing with me every night, than having Sasquatch come in my yard. That's how I feel about the thing right now. And it's so hard to explain, when you haven't experienced one of these creatures, talking about, the fear aspect of it. Have you experienced that type of fear, what I'm talking about? Not just self-preservation, just something that comes over you that you got no control over it. You understand what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. And I felt it. I mean, at first I was frozen, and when I kind of snapped out of it both times, like I said, I ended up taking off. But yeah, it's definitely, I saw one off in a distance, and that was safe enough for me, and I turned around and left. But the 2 encounters with the trees, that was pretty up close and personal. And had that stepped out from behind the tree and I saw it, I hear stories of people that see them that close and they just don't want to go back in the woods. Hunters that don't want to go hunting anymore. It is definitely something that scared the heck out of me.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm one of them. Yeah, it happened to me 13 years ago. But it's an emotional type of fear. You know, it's not anything. I mean, it's rational to run away from something that can kill you when you're sure that it can kill you. You know, that kind of fear. That should be in every single one of us. What I'm talking about is something that lasts. You know, it just lasts for forever, for a long time anyway. If you can actually ever get over it, but that's one of those things that you don't want to experience again. So you do stop doing what you used to do. You know, you end up changing things completely most of the time. Some people don't. Some people want to go back after it. They want to go look and see what it was and get good evidence for it to show everybody else. Yeah, Philip Soares, 30 ghosts. I'd name every one of them. I would name every single one of them before I wanted to have a Sasquatch come around. Absolutely.
Thing 1, thing 2, down to thing 30.
Right. Look, Linda swears there's one here anyway, and this is a big old house. It's 3,100 square foot house. It's huge, and it's been here for a long time. And it's kind of creepy. Sometimes I could be sitting on the couch and I'll see something walk out of the corner of my eye. I see it all the time. Linda talks to it. So, and I tell her, you know, don't encourage it. Just don't. So it keeps your company when I'm not here. Well, tell that thing to go away when I'm here. That's how I feel about it. I'm not a ghost. I'll tell ghost stories all day long. No problem. I just don't want them to be around me.
Ghosts everywhere. They are
everywhere. Mike Kirkpatrick. Mike has a really good story. You can actually hear Mike's story on Mogollon Monster. If you guys haven't gone and subscribed to Mogollon Monster, it's pronounced Mogollon. Where's the banner? Is the banner here?
Mogollon.
Oh, I don't have a banner for it.
It's Mogollon.
Yeah, there it is right there.
Mogollon.
Yes, it's our buddy Russell. It's his new channel, Mogollon Monster. Mike Kirkpatrick's his first real official guest video. You guys need to go check that out. Make sure you subscribe and go subscribe to the new channel, The Shutter. Come on, guys. You got to go. You want to hear these stories? I'm putting them out there every day. I'm not putting any more stories on Bigfoot Odyssey. If you want to hear them, you're going to have to go to The Shutter. We're going to have a link in the description for it. So y'all go over there and subscribe now. Boost me up. You got to get it. Got to get it there. Do you have a YouTube channel, Kevin?
Yeah, I do have the Strange Days in the Hockomock Swamp.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking Facebook. I have Strange Days in the Hockomock Swamp is a Facebook channel. I'm actually thinking, well, I've already kind of prepared it. I might actually do a show on YouTube called Strange Wilderness. But the movie came out too with that name, so I might have to change it to maybe Strange Days in the Wilderness or something like that. But
well, see, that's the thing about YouTube, it being an amateur platform, is you can name it whatever you want to. There can be 13 channels with exactly the same name. Now, it's probably not a good idea to do that. You know, it's going to be hard to single yourself out that way. But there's another channel out there. It's called Shutter. It's just Shutter. And he's got like 110,000 subscribers. I didn't know. I didn't see him. So I named the other channel the Shutter. And I think I got 227 subscribers. Those hardcores. I just put a video up today. I got another one sitting waiting. 2 more stories. As soon as this is over, I'm going to upload them on there for you guys. So that'll be a video number 5. Go subscribe.
nice.
Western Plains asks, do you believe all the cryptids are physical beings or something else? Could some of them be something else possibly?
I tend to believe that all these creatures are physical beings. I was kind of skeptical about hearing of Bigfoots coming through portals, but I'm not so skeptical about that now. I'm actually thinking that there are certain things, because I recently heard a story from a very reliable person about he thought he went into a portal and then came out of the portal, and the story seemed pretty good. So I don't know about this Sasquatch camouflage thing, but cloaking, yeah. I've seen some interesting pictures on it, but for the most part, I think they're physical beings.
I think some context might need to be provided for someone's idea of what cloaking is. Is it something that they believe can just be flipped on and off like a switch? or is it something natural in the hair that when they get up next to something in the sunlight, then it just makes them blend in like they're invisible, like they're cloaked. I would tend to lean more toward that, just from what we've seen from Mark Zaski and MK Davis, the studies they've done on the hair and how light hits it and affects it. I think that's why we don't have game cam pictures of these creatures, because I think their hair absorbs that infrared light. I think it doesn't hit and reflect back to trigger the camera. I think they walk in front of cameras all the time. The camera just doesn't go off because of the hair. That's just what I think. And some of the things you hear from eyewitnesses, especially the ones in the South and places like Florida and Louisiana, you hear these stories of people saying the hair, it looked, when we finally saw the thing, knew something was there, and then he looks up and now he notices there's this face right there, and now he can actually see the hair and it looks like it's alive, like it's changing colors, with the surrounding. So I just wonder if people would just kind of make that distinction. What are they thinking here? Does it turn invisible, or is it something that's natural that the hair does to natural light? And I'm not talking about the beer there either, guys. No, much as I like natural light.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good idea.
Let's make the distinction. That's all. Western Plains again. Have you ever introduced yourself while in the woods? You talk to them?
No, I can't really say I have. I usually turned tail and ran, but I haven't done. Well, I take that back. When I was at my son's house and he was talking about his encounters there, I spent a weekend there, and we were out doing some tree knocks and stuff. But I think they had moved on at that point because we never heard anything. And the interesting thing was the house was near a quarry, and that was where the howls would come from, was off in the direction of the quarry.
What do you think it is about quarries?
I don't really know, but it's a lot of things correlate with rocks and whether they give out some kind of vibe or something. I've read stories on that, and I don't know what attracts Sasquatch, Bigfoot to these areas, but there's definitely a lot of reports.
Yeah, I've heard of quarries a lot. Nadie, oh no, it's not. Nadie H. Do you think Sasquatch know the medical benefits of wild mushrooms, or any of the?
Do people know the?
I'm sure they eat them. I quite honestly didn't see any in the fecal matter that I saw, but they eat blueberries, and there were rodents in there.
How much of the rodent was in there? When you say there was rodent in there?
You could see like the bones and the hair, and like I said, when I had my first encounter, it definitely had a red squirrel in its hand. In fact, I think when it was hunched over, I saw like this motion with the arm, and I think it was killing it at the time, and then it just walked up with the red squirrel and took off.
Now, you talked about that being a pretty long way away, right?
Yeah, it was about the length of a football field away.
Okay, about 100 yards. That's far enough. I thought for some reason I was thinking it was a lot farther than that. I'm thinking, man, you got some good eyes. You can see a red squirrel from that.
No. It was about 300 yards away. Yeah.
300 feet.
Yeah, excuse me, 300 feet. Yeah.
Okay.
Length of a football field. And I used to play football. I should know.
There you go. I don't know. That's not some Canadian thing, is it? 300 feet on football, or 300 yards to a football field? I don't know.
Mary H says lots of limestone in the triangle.
Yes, there is. Yeah, there's a lot of quarries too in the Bridgewater Triangle.
I wonder if there's like tunnels, caves as well connected.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
To quarries and limestone, essentially. All those, there's lots of cracks, isn't there? We've got a place where I'm from, an area. It's just a hill, a crag full of limestone, and the amounts of caves you can see, little tunnels. I mean, I couldn't get in them, but I'm sure something could. And who knows where it all goes to.
Well, that area up there is pretty karst as far as the topography goes. Would you say, what do you think would be the one thing? Is there one thing that maybe ties all this stuff together in the triangle? Would there be
A portal.
No, not a portal. No, I just mean what I mean is.
I was actually going to say portal myself because
So you think there's a portal there that ties all this strange behavior together?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's a 5,000 acre wilderness area. I mean, it's pretty big, so there's plenty of places for these things to hide in. But um, I am kind of leaning towards portals too, as these creatures are coming out of portals.
So if there's a common denominator there, it would be that it's in an area where it can support this quote unquote portal, and all these creatures are just close to it.
I should mention too that the Wampanoag Indians gave the name Hockomock to this area, and Hockomock actually means the place where spirits dwell. And then the early settlers came along, and they weren't too excited about being in this swampy area either, and they actually called it the Devil's Swamp. So a lot of strange things come out of areas that have devil associated with it.
Yeah, there's usually a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Seminole Indians called the Sasquatch devils. They still call them that today.
Yeah.
If you can ever get to talk to a Seminole Indian about anything at all, they're not known for giving up interviews, but when they do talk about it, that's what they refer to them as devils. There's a place in South Florida called the Devil's Garden, and it's on the interior of the state, and everybody there on the edge pushing these creatures in towards this interior. And there's Seminole Indians, they hate them. They have a lot of issues with these because they run a lot of cattle and things like that down there, and they just have a lot of big issues with them. But that's what they call the place, is devil. So it does seem that way whenever something like that is around. A name like that, Devils or Demon Gorge, Ape Canyon, those names like that, they get named that for a particular reason. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, while we got a few minutes left, just ask everyone, take just a second, go over there and hit that thumbs up button for us if you like it, if you're enjoying the show so far. We appreciate you guys that do that. Absolutely. And share it. Get us out there. We just hit 25,000 subscribers the other day. It was major milestone for Bigfoot Odyssey. We've been going for 2 years, and at 25 grand, it was I don't know. I wish we would have had something. Daniela sent me a thumbnail to put up for a video, and I noticed it, I think 2 days after she sent it to me, because we were close. We were almost there. We had like 2 or 3 left to go, and she went ahead and made it and sent it to me. And I don't know. I probably should have made some kind of video, let me and Linda to sit down and do something, but strange times going on right now, so we didn't do it. But thank all you guys that do go over there and hit that thumbs up button for us. You get the thumbs down button too. I do it every time. It's the same thing for us.
Philip Soares, any evidence Bigfoot have of some kind of written language or drawings? Have you ever come across anything like that, Kevin?
No, I personally haven't, but
or heard of anything like that?
No, I really actually haven't heard of written or anything like that. So,
was there any more questions? If anyone's got any questions, put them up. If you had anything follow you home, BF?
Follow my son home?
Follow you home? Yeah, anything.
Well, as I said, in Vermont, my first encounter was actually down a snowmobile trail, and then that night something got up and stood up in the field at night and walked off in the woods, and I think it was the same Sasquatch. So yes, I think it did follow me home when I was up in Vermont.
Right. Creepy.
Or it was watching me the whole time I was there, because I was there.
There's a common denominator for you right there. There's one right there. These things tend to know where you live.
Yeah.
Either that, or I don't know. I've made reference to this quite a few times of what I think this could be. Not them necessarily following you home, but always being there. but just watching us so closely that they know our mannerisms and how we behave and how we act. And then once we become even slightly aware that these creatures exist, it's almost like they know it. And then I guess they don't feel like they have to hide quite so much then. So here comes the rock throwing and hooping and hollering and knocking. I heard a knock right out here. And there's miles of woods right out my back door here that I'll never go in. That I heard a knock. It was just loud and as clear as day. I never even looked up when I heard it. I just acted like I didn't hear it at all and went inside. I don't want that. No.
Yeah. Andy gone fishing. Do you think they use fire or travel to bury their dead, or fire to bury their dead, or is that or do they bury their dead? I think he means.
Yeah.
I think they do bury their dead. You know, it's like they say, nobody's come up with a body, nobody's found a dead body out in the woods, but I don't really agree with that. I think bodies have been taken. I think there's a big government cover-up, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's almost obvious. There has to be an answer to this question, though, because we know these creatures exist. It's not like we think they're out there. We know they're there. There has to be an answer to why a body hasn't been found or why you haven't seen one on the 9 o'clock news. I always said it's because you have to look at the nature of the creature itself. You know, you're not talking about some bear that isn't self-aware of itself, just walking through the woods and dying and leaning against a tree for someone to come and find one day if other animals don't take care of it. You're talking about a sentient being predisposed to hiding. It's not taught. It's just in them to hide. I don't think they hide from us. I think they hide from everything. Even in the dark, these things are hiding. Now you take a creature like that is sentient, self-aware, does not want to be found out. Why would they leave one of their dead around for us to find? Doesn't make any sense to me. So no, I think when one of them passes away, they take it and do something with it, probably bury it. We find a lot of the hominoid skulls. We've been digging up type specimens out of the ground for the last 200 years of these hominid skulls, which I think is these creatures, and full skeletons, the late Chicano boy. How do you get that? It's hard to get that. The whole thing's got to be buried, you know, to get the whole fossil. Obviously it was buried. So there's a lot of these stories and things you can put two and two together. But when it comes right down to it, there has to be an answer. There has to be an actual answer because the creatures actually exist. Why haven't we found one? I think all the above. The government takes away the bodies when grandma hits one with her car. They bury their dead. Or if they just die alone, something else happens to it. We haven't found that one yet.
But I mean, do you find dead bodies of bears and deers and often? I mean,
no, that's the whole thing. I go in the woods all the time. I've never come across a dead bear. Occasionally I've seen dead deer, but you know, it's rare. But yet, you know, there's thousands of bears and thousands of deers out there, and you come across just a couple. So
there's
how big?
How big?
Go ahead.
32 million white-tailed deer. That's just white-tailed deer. That's not any other kind of deer. Just white-tailed deer in the lower 48. 30 to 32 million annually. And hunters kill about 1.5 million of those.
I mean, I was lucky yesterday. I actually came across 2 deer. I live on Cape Cod, and we have a pretty big deer population. But I'm just driving down this very, heavily populated housing section, and 2 deer come out of nowhere, and it's like, well, what are they doing here? But you know, I rarely see them here, but you know, but they're there.
Good, man, deer, they'll take over.
Yeah,
you gotta hunt them. Somebody has to do that. This deer will destroy the habitat for everything else. It's just they'll absolutely eat it up. But you want to take? Let's take one more question, and then we'll call it a show.
Well, I can't see any. But what are you doing next? Then you're going to go on this? Oh, I really think that was a.
Why hide this? I don't know. What do you think? Why do you think they keep this hidden?
Well, I think number one, if people knew that there were creatures out there that possibly could be tracking people down and eating them. It's not going to do too well for the national and state parks, and I think that's pretty much why all this is being covered up. I mean, you've got the whole 411 phenomenon too, and you know that there's something there, but they're not going to let us know. Not now, anyway.
Validation is going to open up years of litigation for this creature. Just the logging industry is going to be tied up in court for months. PETA will have the logging industry tied up in court for months just so they can log one area. Someone's got to go in to see if there's a Sasquatch in there before you can go log it out. They're not going to, no. It's going to cost them too much money, man.
Got one more question.
No, I actually didn't smell anything, that pungent smell, but no, I didn't.
Well, you might have it to come when you go on your expedition, your search.
The funny thing is, when you're in a swamp, there's a lot of skunk cabbage, so I'm sure I'm going to be smelling something.
I think you know it. I know we've smelled them here, and it's not like anything else I've ever smelled. It's like a zoo with like a stale dish rag smell. It's bizarre. It's the strangest thing I ever smelled. But hey, we've come to the end of our hour. It's been a great show, Kevin Foster. We really appreciate you coming on here, and let's make sure, and I think we'll have a link to Strange Days in the Hockomock Swamp. You can find it on Amazon. We'll put a link in the description. You can go check out Kevin's book. And when you get your expedition done, Kevin, come back on, tell us what went on, what you did.
Oh, definitely. I will. Thank you very much. It's been a good show.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming on. Make sure you go subscribe to Hidden Existence on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to Mogollon Monster on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to my channel right now. Go do it now. The Shutter. I got a video just went up. We're going to put another one up in about an hour. It's going to take to upload the whole thing once we get done here. But thank you guys that have already come over and are supporting us there. Thank you, Jeff Townsend, for that super chat. You are the man. Thank you, moderators. You guys are awesome. And thanks, everybody, for showing up here tonight on the Researchers Report. We'll see you Saturday today's Saturday. We'll see you Wednesday. For who? Who we got Wednesday?
I don't know. Weren't you arranging? Was it Zach? Is that coming on?
Zach. I'm gonna talk to Zach from Rooted Expeditions. We're gonna get Zach on here. But happy Easter, everybody, and y'all sleep in, have fun, stay safe, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.